Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of Maza's Musings. So, in looking back at my first episode, I decided that it felt a little bit too sports talk radio-y at certain points. So I'm going to kind of try to keep things a little more structured and a little bit more even-keeled moving forward. I think that that's the best way to kind of really dive into some of the things I want to dive into and get the information across clearly without really muddying the waters. So we actually have a really great show lined up for you today. We're going to talk about Jerod Mayo, new Patriots head coach. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Sox, though I won't be quite as heated as I was the last time. We're going to talk about some issues in Springfield that have come up. And we're also going to have a special guest. Mark Avery from 2 Weeks Notice Brewing is going to talk about a very special event that's coming up this weekend. So just hang with me and we'll have some fun. So since the last podcast, when I talked about the end of the Bill Belichick era in New England, there has been a move. Jerod Mayo is your new head coach of the New England Patriots, and I took the time to listen to his press conference, introductory press conference, that took place yesterday, Wednesday, and there were some real takeaways that I had that I feel were important to kind of hash out. There was a lot to unpack in a 40-minute press conference, but there were some key things that I think that he said and that Robert Kraft said that I'd like to point out and kind of go over a little bit. So right off the top, I think that fans are going to get a very different vibe from Jerod Mayo as the head coach. He said it right off the top, really. He said, if you can't tell by now, I'm a little bit different up here, even up here. I think that that's something that's going to be refreshing for a lot of fans. I think that's going to be something that's refreshing for the locker room. There's an energy that he really seems to bring that I think will resonate with a lot of people. And I think that it's going to inject some life organizationally that has been lacking the past few years. So I think that that's the first major takeaway, honestly, is that this is going to be a personality change for an organization that hasn't had that kind of change in, almost 25 years. Another thing that I found interesting was the contrast in responses to a question about Jerod Mayo being the first New England Patriots coach of color, specifically the first black coach. Robert Kraft said, essentially, he said that he was colorblind, and he said, quote, I chose the best head coach for this organization. He happens to be a man of color, but I chose him because I believe he's the best for the job. Now, Mayo, on the other hand, kind of took a different take on this. In his comments, he said, quote, what I will say, though, is I do see color because I believe if you don't see color, you can't see racism. He went on to say that the goal is to understand people, recognize where they're coming from, to be able to fix the problem. And race is an aspect of that in America. So those contrasting views, I feel, are important for a couple of reasons. First, I can appreciate both points. I think that Kraft's colorblind comment was an unfortunate choice of words more than anything, and I believe that his sentiment was more that race didn't factor into his decision to promote Mayo, but I don't necessarily believe that he doesn't recognize Mayo as a black man who may have faced challenges because of his race. Mayo doesn't shy away from the fact that experience he has had as a black man have shaped who he is as a person, and that racism is real. It's also notable that Mayo countered and challenged Robert Kraft in that moment. It's clear that Mayo has a presence and a confidence that even in those moments, he's willing to push back for what he believes in. And I think that that certainly happened with Bill Belichick. But the problem is Bill Belichick had built this cachet. Now, Mayo is coming in as a rookie coach, so he doesn't have that cachet, but he has that conviction that when there's something that he believes in, he is going to make sure that that is known. And I think that's important for him as a coach, because Kraft is going to have questions. He's going to have the answers, and he's going to have conviction behind those answers. So I actually found that to be kind of a refreshing thing to see right off the bat. Another thing that I noticed was that twice Mayo brought up avoiding echo chambers, that he wanted pushback, that he was going to rely on experts, and he talked about being a sponge. I think that that is an important aspect of this, because that was something that was somewhat of a criticism of Bill Belichick in the later years. The room that was once filled with a lot of experienced and talented coaches had kind of thinned out. And there was a concern that there were a lot of, I hate using the term yes men, because that kind of eliminates or discredits the value and the work that the people who are there are doing. But there is something to be said for the fact that it's much harder for you to push back against someone who has been a major part of your ascension to the position you're in now. So I think that that is something that was a valid concern for fans and for those covering the team. And I think that this is the kind of response that a lot of people were looking for. Something else that was notable regarding whether or not Mayo would name coordinators, it seems like that's something that's going to happen. There's been a lot of times in the history of the Bill Belichick era where you didn't have an offensive coordinator, you didn't have a defensive coordinator, even though there's a play caller or whatever. Mayo really talked about how he understood the importance of people understanding their roles. Even though he didn't necessarily care about the title, he understood why that was important to people, both internally and externally. He said, quote, "Sometimes I think in business, in sports, people get caught up in titles, but I also understand the other side. If you want to continue to get promoted, people have to know exactly what you do." So it also ties into something else that Mayo talked a lot about in this press conference, which was development. He talked a lot about development. He made some kind of analogy about coaching and gardening, and the gardener doesn't actually grow anything. He creates the environment that allows things to grow. So this kind of goes into that. And I think that that was something that was a little bit underrated with Bill Belichick, is that he also worked very hard to make sure that if somebody had an opportunity, that they were able to take advantage of it. The Jedfish situation in Arizona is a classic case of that. But I think that that is something that will help organizationally in terms of making sure that people know where they stand inside the building and outside the building. In terms of front office, it really seems like Elliot Wolf and Matt Groh are auditioning, as are others in the building. The word evaluating was used a lot in this press conference. I think I counted 10 times in the 45-minute press conference that term was used. Mayo was candid about the fact that he's inheriting a staff. He said, the staff that I've been working with isn't the staff that I've chosen, but everything is under evaluation. That kind of stuck out to me. It seems like there has been some discussion on this that, hey, Jerod, listen, we're not turning everything over. This is We're going to take a look at everything. These are people in place that we think are going to help you, and we'll see how it goes. Robert Kraft, when asked about who would make a pick or make a signing official, said, quote, "We're counting on our internal people whom we're still learning and evaluating. So we're going to let that evolve and develop. And before the key decisions have to be made, we will appoint someone. At the same time, we'll probably start doing interviews and looking at people from the outside. But my bias has always been, in all our family companies, to try to develop a culture from within where we understand one another." And then later, when he was asked if he'd appoint a general manager, he said, quote, "As I said, this is the first time in a quarter century that we've had to make a major changes. And we want to see what we have in-house, look what's out there in the marketplace, and then do what we think is right." So I think this, coupled with reports that the Patriots aren't going to be in any hurry to name a general manager or front office personnel, really kind of lends itself to this idea that Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh are going to get the first crack at this. Now, it's been pointed out, I think it was Evan Lazar with the Patriots.com crew during at least one of their podcasts. He pointed out that most often, even when a new GM comes in, he's working with the old regime's scouting department because they've already done the legwork. So it's understandable that the Patriots are going in this direction because people like Matt Groh have already been doing a lot of the legwork. In addition to that, we don't know where Bill Belichick is going, or if he is going to want to take Matt Groh or Elliott Wolf with him, and what's going to happen with that. Elliott Wolf could be in line for a big promotion if he follows Bill Belichick if and when he gets a new job. So these are all things that are going on and pieces that are moving around. And I don't want to get too far into a lot of speculation because by the time this comes out, something may have happened. But I think that this goes into that calculated approach that I talked to in the first podcast, where they're trying to figure out how far they're untangling themselves from Bill Belichick. I did find that it was a little interesting. There were a couple of times where Mayo took the opportunity to take aim at some issues in the locker room without necessarily throwing anybody under the bus. One of the things that kind of struck me a lot, and there was some chirping on social media and with various players talking to the media as the season got worse. And he kind of addressed that a little bit. One of his quotes that really stuck out to me was, he said, quote, "One thing we don't want to do is have people who are complainers or finger pointing or things like that." And there was some of that at the end of last year. And I think that it's something that he hopes to nip in the bud. And those are signs of a dysfunctional operation. It appears that Mayo really wants to reestablish that culture of players self-policing the locker room. It's really something that was a staple of the New England Patriots in their heyday, and he was part of that as a captain. You know, you hear about him, you hear about the Willie McGinnis, the Ty Laws, the guys who really kind of helped promote the culture that Bill Belichick was instilling in the locker room, and that kind of helps with the buy-in overall. He really laid it out in this quote during the press conference. He said, quote, "The best teams I've been a part of have been teams that, whether I'm talking about high school, college, or the NFL, teams that are not led by the players, but things are enforced by the players. It's almost like getting something, your mom or dad telling you something versus your brother. It just hits a little bit differently. I don't want to just talk about offense, but that's across the board. Special teams, defense, and offense. You want your players to have a sense of accountability. You want your players to have a sense of commitment. Lastly, the one thing that I thought was interesting was even with all of these changes, Kraft was pretty adamant that his family was not going to have any more involvement in football operations than it had under previous regimes. Kraft talked a lot about how he had done business with the team over the past 30 something years and what has worked for him. I found it interesting because it was kind of similar to what Bill Belichick got kind of mocked for when people asked him why should they have faith or confidence in the 2023 season and that things would be better. And he said, well, the past 20 something years. It's essentially the same card that he's playing with. Kraft is saying, this is what's worked. This is why you should have confidence in it and why I have confidence in it. So that was something that I found very interesting, both in terms of how that message is received by people, because it was really scoffed at when Belichick said it, and it's kind of accepted when Kraft says it. But also, you've got a lot of unproven people in the room here, and he's still saying, this is the course. This is the course we're going to take. It's worked before, it's going to work again, and he's putting a lot of faith in Mayo and in, presumably, the Elliott Wolves and Matt Gross of the world. So that was something I found very interesting. All right, so the next topic that I really want to get to is something related to the Red Sox again. And I'm going to keep this relatively short because I don't want to just rehash things that I've said over and over again. But in between the last podcast, where I went a little bit off the rails, especially with regard to the Red Sox, I wanted to take another look at something that was said most recently and was reported in the Boston Globe. Now, these are comments that new GM Craig Breslow said to Pete Abraham, and really they're disappointing, and they get to the point that I was going to previously, which is that even if a rebuild has to happen, when you are the Boston Red Sox, it shouldn't take as long as it's been taking. We've been told through the Chaim Bloom era that the rebuild was on. We waited. We shouldn't have to continue waiting. The investment just isn't there. So let me get to what Breslow had to say, and really kind of illustrates some of what I'm talking about. Now, Breslow says that he believes that the organization still supports putting a championship caliber team on the field. Then he gets into this, and this is a quote. But I think the reality is that it's going to require a step forward from the young position players. It's going to require the build out of a talent pipeline of arms that we can acquire, we draft, and we can develop internally. Now he goes on to say, and it's going to require aggressive player development in the minor leagues and the major leagues so that guys that we think are the next wave, he names a few, are not just big leaguers, but impact big leaguers. The convergence of all those pieces is the fastest path to a World Series team. That last part is where he loses me. I am totally supportive of the Red Sox wanting to build a strong pipeline of talent. That helps make success sustainable. But saying that that is the fastest path to a World Series team is just false. There is zero reason why the Red Sox and the Fenway Sports Group have to wait. There's no reason. There is a path for the Red Sox that they have that most other teams don't, where they can simultaneously build up a farm system and develop a pipeline while still competing now. They are making a conscious choice not to do that. So, in Breslow's mind, this is the fastest way that he can do it within the parameters that ownership has given him. And that is the part that's not being said. Within the parameters that ownership has given him. They've handcuffed him, and this is the way that he has to do it. And so in his mind, based on what he has to work with, this is the fastest way to go about that, to getting the Red Sox back to championship contention. But as I've said over and over again, the Red Sox are one of the few teams that have a unique situation where they can do both. And it's disingenuous to the fan base to argue otherwise. So looking to local politics, there was something in Springfield that seemed to fly under the radar more than I thought it would. The Republican Stephanie Berry reported that the Springfield city clerk informed her that the FBI would not be investigating allegations that members of former city councilor Justin Hurst's campaign for mayor had attempted to essentially purchase people's votes. For those who aren't aware of this situation, essentially an accusation was made, and there were several affidavits from sworn officers, the city clerk, other election workers, as well as video footage that essentially showed that in the exercise of driving people to the polling place, there was the appearance that one of the members of Justin Hurst's campaign was giving out money. And based on some of the dot connecting between the transcripts of statements that were made and sworn affidavits and the video and all those kinds of things, essentially the accusation was that these people, the majority of whom were from local homeless shelters, were being paid for their vote. Now, this does not mean that this is at all settled. I wanted to refer to something that Matt Safransky of the local blog Western Mass Politics and Insight had to say about this. I found that his insight into this was particularly interesting. He has a law background on top of everything else. So this is what he had to say about this. That the FBI is not getting involved tells me two things. One, the feds lack jurisdiction. Two, the investigation found no evidence of money being transferred or activity that otherwise could be filed under mail or wire fraud. The federal law barring the payment of a voter has bounced around several parts of the U.S. Code for 6 decades, but it doesn't seem to require that a federal election be occurring, at least simultaneously. In other words, were everything the same, but this were a state rep race, the feds would have jurisdiction because Massachusetts holds its state elections concurrent to federal ones. Springfield does not. However, if there were a money or wire mail fraud angle, the feds could impute the vote buying activity into their case. My guess is, and this is Matt Safransky talking, my guess is they did not find evidence, or it was not good enough evidence to pursue. The U.S. attorney would not prosecute on flimsy evidence. He goes on to note, and I would also assume this as well, I wouldn't assume that Hearst or the guy actually caught handing out money are out of the woods, however. Both the Hamden DA's office and the Massachusetts Attorney General's office have jurisdiction on vote buying alone, and local and state prosecutors are historically less risk-averse than the feds. So essentially, it seems like the feds are not going to get involved because, based on Matt's assessment and understanding of the law, they don't feel they have a strong enough case, or they feel that they don't have jurisdiction based on the facts of the case. So the Hamden DA's office or the Massachusetts Attorney General's office could still be involved here. I can say from the reminder standpoint, we have been pursuing this. We don't have any information to add to this at this time, but I can say Stephanie Berry has been on top of this story from day one at the Republican, and she has really been spearheading this effort. It's been an impressive investigation on her part. So this is something that we will have to continue to watch. This is not the end of the road. This is simply one stop in what is going to be a lengthy trip as far as this goes, if I were to be a betting man.
I can see the Springfield line. It's a little snowier. You gave it to me.
I walked out. I'm going to put a plow in my little Ford Fusion, too. I walked right into that. Way to go, Jake. That was a base hit right up the middle.
Well, while neither the snow nor this cold that I am fighting through have been able to stop this podcast, it does seem that the snow was able to stop the city of Springfield in its tracks. The city has really had a problem with its snow removal and management over the past couple of weeks. We've had a couple of storms, one of which did dump a significant amount of snow, while another smaller snowstorm that was mixed with some ice also caused a great deal of problems for the Springfield DPW. While it's not uncommon for the public, even when snow removal is done fairly efficiently, to complain about snow removal and how quickly it's done, the recent heavy snow that we had caused severe problems that even drew the ire of Dominic Sarno. The mayor even released a statement where he apologized and verbally took DPW Director Chris Signoli to task. Now, his actual statement reads, "First of all, my apologies. Even though this was a difficult, long-duration storm, we must and will do better. I have met with DPW Director Chris Signoli on a post-review and clarification on our continued storm cleanup efforts. If you are still experiencing storm-related issues, I urge you to call the 311 call center," etc., etc. Now, that's all well and good, but then the following storm was not nearly as strong. I understand that there was some ice mixed in with it, and the timing was somewhat challenging in that it started just before the commute and ran until just before the evening commute. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a significant snowfall, and late in the day, people were still arguing that they had not received snow removal service on their streets. People trying to get home from work, and this is one of the major things, is even when schools are closed, the vast majority of people still have to go to work. And if we don't have streets that are safe for people to get to work, it's causing undue stress, not only on the people who are trying to get to work, but on the city's other services, namely emergency services. Problems just compound. And of course, I'm not saying anything that the mayor doesn't know. I'm not saying anything that the DPW doesn't know. But I wonder what was actually said in that review after that first big storm, and whether or not there are going to be any changes. What is going to happen the next time there is a large storm? I'm not necessarily going to compare the two winter weather events we've had in the past couple of weeks, because there were stark differences in terms of the timing, the volume, the type of precipitation. So it's not always an apples-to-apples comparison. But really, I feel like, yeah, okay, it's great. You had a conversation with him. Now what is going to happen? What is going to be different? The next time that we have 8 inches of snow, and the snow starts before the morning rush hour, people still have to get to work. People still have to go care for loved ones that may be shut in. People have other responsibilities. Understanding that non-essential travel also makes snow removal more difficult, there has to be an understanding that people still have to go about their lives even when there is snow. People depend on being able to have clean roads so that they can conduct their livelihood. So that is my question for the mayor. What is going to be different? What did DPW Director Chris Signoli tell you about this situation and what happened and how he's going to address it? Saying you're sorry is great, but people need reassurances that it's not going to happen again. Because if you're coming back in a couple of weeks and saying sorry again, nobody's going to accept it. Truthfully, not many people accepted it this time because they don't care. They don't want the apology. They want to be able to get out of their driveway. Mark Avery, co-owner and head brewer at 2 Weeks Notice Brewing Company in West Springfield, took some time to talk with me about an upcoming benefit for a friend and local artist who's going through a hard time right now. All right. I am here with Mark Avery, co-owner and head brewer at 2 Weeks Notice Brewing Company. And he's going to be talking with us about a little benefit event, hopefully a big benefit event that's going to be taking place this weekend on Saturday, January 20th from 2 to 6 p.m. And really, I'm just going to kind of throw it to you, Mark, and you kind of let me know what this is all about and what this party's going to hopefully accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And thanks for having me. Always appreciate it. But so the event on Saturday is FU Cancer Party. And it's for our friend Eric Clark, who is our can artist and has been basically our can artist since the beginning. He was our can artist since we started, and this past summer he started feeling sick. He had a couple episodes where he passed out, didn't know what was going on. Come to find out after a lengthy amount of hospital visits and riding in ambulances and everything else, come to find out he finally got over to Boston early fall, I guess late summer, early fall, and found out that he had, they found a tumor in his bowel, and it ended up being stage 3 small bowel cancer, I guess. So, with that being found out, they obviously had a better idea of how they were going to attack this. They removed the tumor and then are putting him through a small amount of chemo. I forget how many infusions. I think it's 5 or 6. So it's a pretty lengthy amount of chemo that he has to go through. And basically, he's feeling a lot better. Obviously, chemo doesn't make you feel that great either. But as far as positivity goes, he's very positive with what's going on. And when me and my wife found out that it was for sure cancer, we didn't even hesitate as far as trying to find a way to help them out, because we knew kind of financially what had happened with everything, which kind of stinks. So we decided that a long time ago, when we did really know what was going on, that we were going to throw some sort of benefit party to help them out in a financial way to just help them recover. So we finally planned it and we picked the date. And so that's happening this Saturday. And we have a ton of raffles, awesome raffles from a ton of businesses, whether it's breweries or just, we have Red Sox tickets, we have Bruins tickets, we have, big screen TVs, everything. So Eric's one of those guys that is kind of universally loved by everybody and the most liked person I've ever met in my life. So when people have the opportunity to donate raffles, it was we have so many, and it's just amazing to see. So we're hoping that between, the raffles, doing a 50-50, he's actually auctioning off a lot of his work as well that we have hanging on the walls now that he put up. So we'll be auctioning off a lot of that, as well as a $10 door, donation when you walk in. And then, yeah, we're hoping that I'm judging by the amount that we've seen people interacting, I think this place is going to be packed on Saturday, probably to capacity, which is great. It's kind of what we were shooting for. So yeah, once we're done, every dollar and cent that we raise is going directly to Eric and his family. So we're hoping we kind of have a goal that we're trying to reach, and hopefully we hit it and we can help them out.
Now you've got a few bands on tap as well. Who you've got playing tonight or for
Yeah,
that event?
so in classic, Eric is we're very similar in that we're both musicians too for a while. So he was very involved in the music scene as well, and we were like, let's get some bands, like let's get our friends' bands to play, or if you have certain bands that you want to play, let us know. So he actually kind of handpicked the three bands. So we have Fail to Say, who are kind of newer, and actually we know pretty well as well. The Agonizers, who have played here before, they're kind of like a punk rock band. They're really awesome too. And our friend Andy, who I actually play in a cover band with as well. He's kind of playing a small little set as well. So yeah, three different bands, and it's going to be, it'll probably be packed to the gills, and it'll be kind of chaotic, but it should be a blast.
So yeah, if you've ever been in the brewery, you've seen Eric's work. It's all over the walls. Obviously a very very cool guy. So obviously there's been a great outpouring, as you've said, and hopefully that'll continue for you on Saturday. While we're here, you guys got anything else going on coming up?
So we have coming up January, that's pretty much it. That's kind of like the big event we have going on. And then February, we have another show that's going to be happening too with Garden Grove. That's the name of them. They're a Sublime tribute band and our cover band, and then another band. So that's on February 20th, I believe. And that's going to be a nice big party as well. And then other than that, it's the usual, day-to-day stuff here at 2 weeks. New beers, great food, all that
Yeah, you
stuff.
guys, the kitchen seems to be something that you kind of had a couple fits and starts with the kitchen, but it really
Yeah.
seems to have taken off now.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, so Eric's wife was in the kitchen last summer as well. So she was kind of, she's been a huge part of 2 weeks as well. So, but yeah, we had a few people that were in there. Some of them were great, and we're just, a lot of it just happened to be they just got other opportunities. And then it was just kind of took us forever to finally find somebody to take over the kitchen. We were always kind of renting the space to somebody, and we found that was a lot harder. So we ended up just putting the kitchen in our license, the kitchen license in our name. So it's now it's our kitchen. And we found a great guy, Kevin, who got it up off the ground and then kind of handed it off to Emily, who now runs it. And she's been killing it. And we're having people come in for food specifically, which is awesome. Which was always the ideal situation. So it's good to finally have something to go along with the beer. And I know people were really clamoring for more food options instead of like food trucks. Food truck game is so hard to do, especially as a small business owner, and to try to book them and blah, blah, blah. So we just kind of got fed up with that. And not that any of the food trucks in the area are hard to deal with. It's just a hard job to be booking those all the time because they're busy as well. So yeah, it's been great to finally have a kitchen that we can, be proud of.
Yeah, man, I gotta say, I do miss the roast beef.
I know, man. So it's in the works, okay? Believe me. Being somebody from the North Shore, I was like the one thing where I'm like, listen, I was talking to Emily. I'm like, I got to teach you about this stuff. It's called the North Shore roast beef. And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, oh, come with me on a journey.
We're uncultured out here in Western Mass. It's
Yeah.
it's the one Arby's in Chicopee, and that's about it, man.
Well, that was the funniest thing is when I moved out here, I think it was, my son's 12 now. So yeah, it was like 11 years ago when we moved out here. And I was like, I got a part-time job working at like a liquor store, just to it was like a craft beer liquor store. And I was like, you guys have any roast beef shops out here? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like Arby's? I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not a roast beef shop. No, 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 no. And it's like a barren wasteland out here of roast beef shops. Somebody should really, hop up and do that. Believe me, if I had a chance or the money to open up a roast beef shop, I probably would out here. I think do pretty well. But you got to do it right.
All right. Well, circling back, it's a cancer benefit for Eric Clark at 2 weeks' notice on Saturday, January 20th from 2 to 6. I'm not going to read the full name that's on the flyer here because I'm not sure what the rules are in terms of. But anyway, any chance you'll be on stage playing a little bit, or am I just putting you in a bad spot right there?
No, you're not. I'm actually going to be bartending Saturday, so I'll be working. But yeah, I wish I could. Well, maybe. You never know. Andy, who is playing, the drummer that's hopping up with him, is also the drummer in our cover band. So you never know. It depending on the song selection. I might hop up there for a few minutes.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and it sounds like you're going to have a great turnout. But there's always room for more and more, right? So
Good.
hopefully, some people will hear this and want to come on out.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Well, we did it, folks. We made it through another podcast. I really want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen. And I really want to thank you for putting up with my nasally disappearing voice. I really appreciate Mark Avery from 2 Weeks Notice taking the time to talk with me. I'd also be remiss if I didn't express my excitement for the upcoming Reminder Publishing podcast. It's called So That Reminds Me, and it'll be launching this Friday. This is an exciting step for the Reminder. This is the first time we've done anything like this. We're excited to share it with you, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on it. So I encourage you to head on over to the Reminder's social media or wherever you get your favorite podcasts and seek out So That Reminds Me. And as always, every week, don't forget to tune into Maza's Musings. I'd also love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, if you have any thoughts on something that I've talked about, or if you just want to shoot me something and say, hey, dude, you're an idiot, go for it at mazasmusings@gmail.com. That's it for me for this episode. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.